They say every pie and pud tells a story, and today I'm going to prove it. I'm on the trail of a long-lost recipe, uncovering an international cheese war, and telling you all about me and my 6 years spent baking in Cyprus. Hello and welcome to Pies and Puds, which is all about my affection for straightforward, honest food that's easy to cook but delicious to eat. Here's what's coming up on the show today. I uncover a forgotten part of Britain's baking past, a tart that was born of both our seafaring heritage and the exotic flavours that it carried to our shores. The Cumberland rum Nicky, which alleged to have come from here.
Alleged? Of course it came from here. Where else is it going to come from?
Made to make your mouth water, I make these tasty snacks with a cheese that caused a European bust-up. Get my... I always have to have at least one. It's like a lucky spin. I'll be revisiting my days when I lived in Cyprus with my friend, Cypriot chef, Tonya Buxton.
So I've got the yeast as well that's going in there.
The Maya.
Maya. Maya, it's lovely because it sounds like magic, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does. And I unite the tastes of Cyprus and Britain in this beautiful pork pie.
So that must look amazing when you cut through it.
Let's hope so. Let's not build it up, shall we? My guests get together to enjoy all these great treats. That's delicious.
Thank you.
That's really, really good. I love exploring Britain's food history and recreating long-lost dishes. So when I heard about an old recipe that preserves our maritime heritage, I was straight on the case. Much has been written about the origins of British baking. So imagine my surprise when a recipe I've enjoyed many times before turned out to have much more behind it than I knew. This is Whitehaven in Cumbria, where I hope to explore the origins of this luxurious tart. It contains rum, dates, apricots, and goes by the name of Cumberland Rum Nicky. Something that's always confused me is why it's called a Nicky and not a tart or a pie. Wow.
Absolutely superb, isn't it?
What a view. Anne Cook has been studying Whitehaven's local history for years.
This actually was the second biggest port in England.
The second biggest port in England. That was the second biggest port in England.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had bathtubs bigger than that. I mean, what happened to Liverpool? I mean, Liverpool was obviously just down the road, but this at the time was the biggest.
But this is the one.
trade.
This is where all the merchants were in. It wasn't a planned port, but it was added onto all the time and extended as the town got bigger. And you can see we've got 4 or 5 lighthouses, and you know they were added on, and then another arm came out and another lighthouse and things like that.
Looking at it now, it's hard to imagine that in the 1800s, Whitehaven was a cargo capital of England, the destination for the tall ships sailing from the Caribbean. They were filled with ingredients that fed Britain's growing taste for exotic fruits and spices. Amazingly, the Whitehaven town archives contain ships' records from those times. This is an inventory of what was brought in. Now, this is in 1861. They're bringing in sugar, tick. They're bringing in rum, obviously, because these guys are rum traders. But they're also bringing in preserves. Now, that's the killer blow for me. Now, that would have been your apricots, that would have been your dates. The family would have had the flour. Well, they're all the key ingredients for making a rum Nicky. So, the 18th century merchants of the Caribbean were importing the rum and fruits needed for the Cumberland Rum Nicky. But they must have been exotic and expensive. Jefferson's were one of the main shipping companies at the time, and their original offices are still here in Whitehaven, preserved as a museum. The museum manager is Phil Hazelhurst.
This is the heart of the Jefferson's empire. From here, they ran a worldwide business.
How did it all start for them?
Originally, back in the early 1700s, they were doing wine, spirits, champagne, and various other things. But what they wanted to do after 1780, when Henry took over from his father, he bought this place and he wanted to get into rum and sugar.
Do you know, when they came back to Whitehaven with the rum and the sugar, and I noticed they also had things like preserves. Can I ask you if they had two things?
Yes.
Two key things. They're important. One of them's dates, and the other one is apricots.
Well, certainly dates, because without dates you couldn't have some of the dishes that are so known with Cumbria today.
The Cumberland rum Nicky, which alleged to have come from here.
Alleged? Of course it came from here. Where else is it going to come from? This was the premier harbour. This was the M1 to the destination. This was a nexus that meant that Cumberland rum Nicky was basically just... It had to be made here. There was nowhere else on the planet it could have been made.
For the Jeffersons, their imported goods made them wealthy and prosperous. But for the everyday people of Whitehaven, things were far less rosy. I know that the sailors didn't get paid a lot of money. The overall conditions of them living in Whitehaven must have been quite squalid.
We're talking about houses stacked one on top of the other, 2 rooms, 12, 14 people in there, no water, no sanitary facilities. There would have been absolutely no way of not being able for disease to spread. I mean, she probably wanted to go on a ship and see the world and get some fresh air in your lungs, really. The
story is the family of the sailors were actually producing the tart for them for their return journey. The point is, how did it get from the ship to their houses?
Well, I think sailors have sometimes been famous for having large hands. And I mean, you've got to remember the title of the pudding you were talking about there. It was because it was nicked. So you have Cumberland rum Nicky.
So that's why it's called a Nicky. It seems that a bit of pilfering piracy went on as the sailors nicked these exotic and pretty expensive ingredients and took them home to their excited families. But to try and prevent all this pilfering, these were built, the bond cellars. I can't see them taking it from here. It's too difficult.
Once it comes into here, it's Fort Knox. It's been signed in, it has to be signed out by the taxman. It had to be purloined while it's still on the ship or in transit to here.
So basically, it was nicked from the ship coming up to here. Someone's probably been paid off and said, do you want your... I've just dropped one off there, mate, there you go. For his buddy.
It dropped off the back of a dray.
Well, that's it. The unique story behind Whitehaven's Cumberland rum Nicky. The locals must be dead proud of it. Hello.
Hello.
Cumberland rum Nicky. Do you know what it is?
Cumberland rum
Nicky. Have you heard of a Cumberland rum Nicky? Never heard of it. Cumberland rum Nicky. Do you know what it is? Have you ever heard of one now? You never heard of one?
No.
I'm from Whitehaven.
You don't know what it is?
I don't know one.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much.
That's absolutely
Nice,
brilliant.
buddy. Do you know what a Cumberland rum Nicky is?
A what? Yeah.
Cumberland. Do you? Where am I going to find one? Where's the nearest place you think I'll find one?
I bet he's got them.
At last, someone is making Whitehaven's pudding. Oh, great. This is the place he said could have the Cumberland rum Nicky. All over the place, trying to find somebody. We find somebody, tell us where it is. What happens? It's closed. Brilliant. To be honest, it probably is too far back in time to really say for certain exactly how a tart like this was created. But I don't care if it's a myth or not. It's a great story. It's a tart that's been made using the contents of an 18th century ship to celebrate the return of the sailors that have been away at sea. I, for one, I'm looking forward to making one. I had an exhausting day up in Whitehaven, and it's good to see you again, Phil. You're all right?
I am.
I'm glad to see you brought some of that rum with you.
Well, we didn't think we'd had enough last time.
Well, no, we haven't. There's a glass. Could you, I'll have a little bit, please.
Just the honours.
Yeah, an honest drop. What surprised me when I started talking to the people was the amount of people that didn't know what a Cumberland rum Nicky actually was.
It is that endangered pie. It's a little bit brown looking. It's very, very rich, and people probably think it's not very healthy for them. But you don't need a huge amount to get a really good boost of flavour.
I've got a little job for you. There's a pair of scissors there, and there's some dates. Can you just basically, what I want you to do is just cut little pieces off like that and just put them in there for me.
Certainly.
And when you've done it, just add a little bit of that rum, just a little capful, and just give it a little bit of a stir for me. Now, what I'm going to show you is the dish that we've been trying to find out all about in Whitehaven, and it's the Cumberland rum Nicky. For all you people out there in Whitehaven that I spoke to, and I asked you, what's a Cumberland rum Nicky? what I'm about to show you. You need to rejuvenate this in your area. Now, to start with, I've got some butter, which I'm going to put straight into the bowl. And then just beat this, just soften it up a little bit, which is perfect. Just room temperature's fine. Then I'm going to add some dark muscovado sugar. Mix this together.
I'm a decent baker, and rather than nick my preserved fruit off a ship, I bought it from a shop. But these chopped apricots and this crystallised ginger, they are pretty much what the tall ships brought to Whitehaven.
How are you getting on? Oh, you beauty.
Few more than that?
It's potent there. That's grand, that is. Okay, we'll just throw that in there as well. And then you mix all these ingredients together. I'm gonna get my hands in there. Now, I love the fact that it was probably called the Nicky because they nick the stuff.
That's right, yes.
I thought that was fantastic.
I was interested to see that you use the dark sugar in that as well,
Yeah.
because that'll give you more of that molasses texture to it as well.
Exactly. It's almost that malty flavour that I want to see sort of riding through it. And then the ginger sort of hits you and goes bang, and then the rum just goes buh, because you're going to get this wave
I mean,
of
you can
flavours
see why
coming through.
it would make a perfect Christmas dish,
yeah.
because it's warming as well as luxurious.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, I obviously need to prepare the pastry for this. So a basic sweet pastry is 3, 2, 1, okay? 3 flour, 2 butter, 1 sugar. That's generally how you make a pastry. And then you may add an egg or a little bit of water. So I need a little bit of flour. So I'm just going to roll out the pastry. I want it to be quite thin because I want that pastry to be quite crispy when I break through. So lift up your pastry, chuck it on the plate, and then take it all the way down. Just tuck it in so you don't get too much spring back. Because it's on a slight ridge, it will shrink back a little bit. So once I've done that, I'm just going to run a knife around the outside just to trim it off. I remember doing this with pies years ago, one of my favourite jobs. So there we have it, 1 lined plate. The filling is going to go in now as well. So we take a big scoopful of that.
Now, this is the one, of course, that could upset some people because you have a pie and people tend to say, oh, well, you blind bake or you'll do it off first.
No, not at all. The only reason, do you know the reason why you blind bake a pie? The main reason why you blind bake a pie?
Well, usually if you put in a wet filling or something in it, is it? Or
But what does that cause?
oh, not a soggy bottom.
Oh, yes. It creates a soggy bottom. So at this stage, because the ingredients are not particularly wet, you're going to get away without getting too much of a soggy bottom.
The bit of pastry you save will become the lid, but this will be no ordinary pie lid.
Now, what I'm doing here is just cutting strips off, which is going to form the lattice work on the top.
That's really the most delicate part of the pie when you think about it.
It probably is. I mean, to be honest, yeah, you're probably right. So the best way to do it, I feel, is if you get some paper, start placing your strips on there.
And continue by alternating between horizontal and vertical until you've got a woven effect. This is a great technique for any pie, allowing you to get a sneaky peek at the filling inside.
Why do we have a lattice top on some pies?
The main reason is for decoration. It's purely decorative. Once you've done that, you end up with a basic lattice work. If you put a bit of pressure down the outside to try and seal it together, and then what you want to try and do is basically, this is a tricky bit, is flip it onto the top of the pie. So you grab it, flip it over.
Oh, that deserves a round of applause.
And then you neaten it all off. So you take a bit of time, just straighten it all off, and then pinch all around the edge where it overlaps, just to force it down. And again, you trim it around the outside. So you go from that, which you bake in an oven for about 25 minutes at 200 degrees C, and you end up with this. There you have your Cumberland rum Nicky.
I'm not sure how they served it in the 19th century, but I'd suggest you serve it warmed with a little rum butter on the side.
Whitehaven, I hope you're watching.
Looking forward to that.
Phil, you'll have to wait a little bit longer to try it.
Still to come, I'll be baking these mouth-watering snacks using a Yorkshire cheese that caused the European Union bust-up.
These are delicious, Paul.
And dough's like not normal dough because it's soft, you know?
And Tonya Buxton brings her delicious taste to the Med.
I can smell it. It's the Cypriot spices that I can smell over this side.
Actually, I'm smelling the British pork.
And there's more great pies and puds.
This is going to taste great, you know. I lived in Cyprus for over 6 years, but there was one dish I never learned how to bake, and that is a flauna. So I've invited my friend Tonya Buxton along to show me how to do it. Welcome, Tonya.
Hi, Paul.
Now, you've got a full array of Cypriot delights here, as far as I'm concerned.
I did. I thought you might miss Cyprus a bit, so I home-cooked you some things that you would have eaten regularly when you're out there.
Absolutely.
Tonya makes amazing Cypriot food.
Have a look at that.
It's a passion that we share through our association with the island. And together, we're going to make a traditional Cypriot pie we both love.
Now, you're going to bake one of my favourite Easter delights, and it's the flauna, which every village in Cyprus apparently makes the best in the world.
Flaounas are filled pastry parcels that can either be salty or sweet, depending on what village they're made in. I can't think of anything similar in British baking.
Would you like to take over from the kitchen?
OK, I will.
If you need me to do anything, just shout and
I
I'll
do.
help,
Because
okay?
you're my baker, you're going to make the dough, and this is Cypriot village flour.
I've worked with this a lot.
Well, obviously. So, to it, I want you to add some very, very Cypriot spices.
OK.
So, this is neklebi, which is the cherry pips.
Right.
OK, so it's the kernels of the cherry pips. They've been ground down.
Yeah, I know the smell.
Yeah,
I've
so
used it a lot. Yeah.
This is the one that comes from, this is mastiki.
That's right, yeah.
Which
That's the gum.
That's the gum. It's the tears. It comes from the island of Chios, and they call them tears. So I want a teaspoon of each of those into the flour.
Can you pass me a teaspoon just in that top drawer there, please?
Yes. And the way that I was taught to make it, and it's not just each village that has the best flaunas, each family has the best flaunas. It's very competitive.
Very.
I like to put a little bit of cinnamon into my flour as well.
A little bit of cinnamon as well?
A little bit of cinnamon in there as well.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Yep.
And then I'll let you go with the rest.
A little bit of salt?
A bit of salt.
OK.
Baking powder, the yoghurt.
Baking powder.
And all of that yoghurt.
All of that yoghurt,
Yeah.
OK.
And then there's some milk to bind.
Now, this dough does have a lot of ingredients, but the result is magic.
So I'm going to make the filling.
OK.
So I've chopped some fresh mint here.
Yep.
Everything just gets put in the bowl. So I'm going to put the mint in. I'm going to add a cup. Oh, this is the main thing to know. In Cypriot cooking, we don't measure anything, as you know.
Yeah.
Everything's done by a glass or a cup. And as long as you use the same glass or cup throughout, it works out just fine.
But it saves on the washing as well.
It does. It really does save on the washing, but not that. But everything's guduru guduru.
Yeah.
Siga,
Yeah.
stomadi. And all of these things mean just, you know, kind of try and use your instincts when you're cooking a little bit and do it the way you like it.
Absolutely,
so I've got a cup of cheddar cheese, which is the way we English Cypriots make it now, because we can't always get hold of
BBCs.
And BBC, British-born Cypriot.
British-born Cypriot. Isn't that cool, BBC?
I quite like that.
After the cheddar, Tonya adds a classic Cypriot cheese, grated halloumi. Raisins will add some sweetness, then a cup of semolina and flour.
And then it's the spices. And again, don't be cheap with the spices. If you go to the bakeries in Cyprus around Easter time, they do all have their own flaunas, but they never smell like the homemade ones.
No.
Because the spices are expensive, and we could always tell if someone was mean. Because if they made a flauna and gave it to you, because you swap flaunas around Easter, if you cracked their flauna and smelt it and it didn't smell of the spices, they were mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tonya's using mastika again, and another popular Cypriot flavour, meklebi, ground cherry kernels.
So I've got the yeast as well that's going in there.
The Maya.
Maya. Maya, it's lovely because it sounds like magic, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So that's all of that done. Now I've got a lot of eggs that are going to go in here, because you've got to bear in mind that these flaunas are eaten after everyone's been fasting for 40 days, a vegan fast. Are you going to do those for me?
No? I'm just standing up, stretching my legs, so I was going to give this dough a bit of a wallop.
OK. Thought it was too much to ask for. Right. So it's about 5 eggs I'm going to put in there. It's a very rich flauna, very rich pie. So I'm just going to beat these up really well.
So that is the main liquid, is it, that goes into the flauna? Egg?
Egg, and then a bit of milk to bind it all.
OK. What do you think of my dough?
Is it right?
OK.
So I'm going to pour that into here, and then I'm going to just give it a really, really good mix. But I think the best way to do it is to put my hands in and get really messy, because that's the way it mixes best. So you just mix that really well. You're going to have to get your hands in there and just really bind it well together.
Right, you need some milk in there as well?
A tiny little bit of milk, just to make it a little bit more. That's it. Perfect, thank you. That's it. What I'd really like you to do is to roll out the dough, please.
Roll out the dough fairly thinly, but not so thin it won't hold the filling. Then, cut out circles. Tonya's little bowl is perfect as a guide.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it and I'm going to press them into the dampened sesame seed. And then to that, you're going to add a tablespoon of the Flauna mixture, just like that.
Yeah.
Then you're just going to... You can do triangles, but my family always did squares.
Yeah, it's always squares, always squares.
So then I'm just going to put a little egg wash on top here. You want this lovely little glossy egg wash on the top, and that's why I've put sesame seeds in the egg as well, so that gets onto the filling. And you leave a little hole at the top there so it can swell and open up, otherwise the pastry will crack.
It looks great.
Et voila.
Fantastic. So they're going to go into the oven now, and you've got some...
I have.
...over here. Now, these look fantastic. That is what I remember as a flauna. Now, you can see the sesame seed all the way around. You can see the filling begin to sort of pull that apart slightly. They're just... And they smell so good. They smell of that mastica.
They're not the most beautiful looking pies, and I know you make much prettier things, but this is proper rustic Cypriot baking.
I look forward to sharing these Cypriot flaounas with my guests later. My next recipe is Mediterranean in style, but with the main ingredients that I found a little closer to home.
I spent many happy years living and working in Cyprus, where I grew to love the local produce. So imagine my surprise when I found an ingredient I had always identified with the Mediterranean being produced in sunny Yorkshire.
When it comes to cheese, I've always associated Yorkshire with the likes of Wensleydale. But there's a lady who's made it her mission to bring a southern European cheese to the Dales, though it hasn't been an easy journey. Judy Bell began making her homemade sheep's milk feta almost 30 years ago. It was her own allergy to cow's milk that inspired her.
I started Shepherd's Purse because I realised that there were quite a lot of people who were intolerant to bovine products, to cow's milk products. I decided to investigate and came home and said to my husband, shall we milk sheep and make cheese?
As you do, Judy. Experimentation began in her own farmhouse kitchen, and soon creating a white, crumbly Greek-style feta cheese became a passion for the whole family.
Her passion has completely and utterly rubbed off on both myself and my sister. Mum's passion for the cheese that she's producing is totally infectious.
This enthusiasm meant that she was determined to make her Greek-style feta from the milk of the local sheep, which fed on the local grass, and then sell it to local customers.
So we made Yorkshire feta, and we salted it not quite so heavily as Greek feta. So instead of putting it into a brine solution, we put it into a wax coating, and it really does keep it fresh and clean. Not a drip look. Yeah. When I'd made the cheese, of course, I had to go out and sell it.
And back in those early days, the business really was a family business, all run from the family home.
So my husband and I set off up the Dales, dropping samples of the cheese off with all the little delis and cheese shops, and I was quite pleased. The majority of them wanted more to try and sell, so it worked really, really well.
In 1993, things really took off with a prestigious award at the Great Yorkshire Show.
And when I came down off the rostrum, having picked up my prize, was surrounded by Tesco.
With a big supermarket chain clambering at the door, her business and her feta were going from strength to strength, but that was all about to change.
A letter dropped on our desk from DEFRA telling us that we would not be able to make feta any longer. It was a great surprise.
It turned out that Greece wanted its feta to have a protected designation of origin, meaning only feta from Greece could use the name, and so a battle commenced.
I was really, really cross and wrote letters to my MP, and the dialogue started, and it went on and on and on, and it was a case of, yes, you can use feta, no, you can't use feta. They couldn't make a decision, but eventually we actually had to stop branding it as Yorkshire feta.
Despite having created a highly respected and popular cheese, Judy and her family were no longer allowed to sell it. Their Yorkshire feta needed a new name.
We got lots of support from the general public, lots and lots of letters of suggesting, but everything that we sent to DEFRA, they rejected, until we eventually came up with fine fettle Yorkshire cheese.
But would a feta cheese not called feta really catch on?
Look at that finished product.
Despite her long international battle, Judy is pretty upbeat about the future.
Fine fettle to us Yorkshire folk means that we've fixed it. So Yorkshire fettle is here to stay. We are going from strength to strength.
I reckon Judy's cheese will bring a Yorkshire twist to my Cypriot dish.
I'm delighted that Judy has travelled down from Yorkshire and has brought with her some of that fettle cheese, which will make a wonderful addition to my spinach and pine nut parcels. Welcome, Judy.
Hi there.
Now, what a fascinating story that is about the fettle.
I started the business making sheep's milk cheeses, and I thought, well, everybody will know this is a sheep's milk cheese, and so I will call it Yorkshire feta, distinguishing it because it's not as salty as a Greek feta. We don't sit it in brine.
And this is the feta here?
That's the feta, yes.
Can I try some?
Yeah.
I like the idea of the wax. Again, that's very different.
The wax keeps it nice and fresh. Great in sauces, but there is nothing better than a 100% sheep's milk feta.
Now, this dish is going to be a spinach and pine nut parcel. And I'm going to use this fettle inside it as well, which I think will work extremely well.
Would you like me to crumble it?
Do you know what? Yes. I'm going to get you a little plate. Hang on. There you go, Judy. If you could just break down that fettle for me, that'd be fantastic.
This recipe is based on a Middle Eastern speciality called a fataya, which I've eaten before. Rather than using pastry, the filling is wrapped in a soft bread dough. It might seem unusual for a pie over here, but in the Med, it's how they've been making them for centuries.
Now, in this bowl, I've got some flour, to which I'm going to add some seasoning, some salt, and I'm going to add some yeast to this. I'm using the fast action stuff because, I mean, to be honest, it's far easier to use than the fresh. It doesn't stink out your fridge, because stick that in your fridge and it stinks after 2 weeks. This stuff lasts forever. Blend it all together.
Then, add a little bit of olive oil, a splash of water, and mix until it forms a soft dough.
I'm just going to pop it on the bench and then just work it. Basically, just stretch it for a couple of minutes just to smooth it off a little bit and actually incorporate all the ingredients throughout the whole dough. And you end up with a beautiful, smooth dough like that, which needs to go back in the bowl and rest it for about an hour. After an hour, it will rise. And the only reason why I've covered it is if you're in a drafty area, it just prevents the skin from going on the top, that's all. So, pull out the dough. It's lovely and smooth and soft. What we need to do is divide this up, and we're going to make some parcels with it. So first of all, I'll probably take, that will be enough for 1, 2. The balls are roughly about 100 gram each, maybe a little bit more. There you go. Now, in a pan, I'm just going to put this heat on at the moment, because what I'm going to use as the base is obviously spinach. And I'm actually using frozen spinach.
Now, you might be surprised to see me using frozen spinach, but it's actually quite easy to use. And if you get a good quality one, it can be less watery than the fresh stuff.
And then you're going to evaporate off the liquid, and what will happen is this will turn into a beautiful mush, not too dissimilar to this. Into this bowl, I'm going to add some pine nuts. Now, I've toasted these. I think it releases the flavour. Do you like toasted pine nuts? I mean, the difference is just huge. Pop that in there as well. And obviously, you've crumbled down some beautiful feta.
Yes.
And this is going to go inside there as well. I'm going to add a little bit of mint and basically just fold all these ingredients together. And this is the key ingredient in the parcels itself. Now, a little bit of flour on the bench. Get my... I always have to have at least one. It's like a lucky spin. Roll out the pieces of dough. You want to make it into a rough circle. There you go. And all you do is grab a
That
good...
smells delicious.
It is gorgeous.
I don't really want my parcels to look like a Cornish pasty, so I have another plan.
This is the funny bit. Flatten it down, because I want to make this quite triangular. So you shape it with your hands, shape the filling into a rough triangle, like so. That's pretty triangular to me. And then you grab the sides and then pinch that down, like so, to seal it. You bring up the base, which is here, lift it up, pinch that down that side, and again the other side, pinch it all the way down again. So what you end up with is almost a triangle pastry, like so.
Bake them at 220 for 15 minutes. And they should look like this.
You have spinach,
Amazing.
pine nut, feta parcels.
These are proper little hand-sized pies. Leave them to cool for a bit and they'll be perfect to take on a family picnic.
I'm sorry, Judy. Thank you for bringing in your cheese, but we're going to have to wait a little bit longer before we get a chance to try it.
Let's wait. So long as we taste them, that's fine.
Earlier, Cypriot chef Tonya Buxton showed me how to make flaounas, tasty, traditional Mediterranean snacks.
Now it's my turn to do a slightly British thing. Now, this is a raised pork and egg pie, but I'd like you to add a little bit of a Cypriot twist to it as well.
Got a few ideas for that.
OK.
I'm quite proud of this pie. Done right, it has a magic egg running all the way through. The sausage meat flavour is simple and British. Well, it is unless you've invited your Cypriot friend over.
Now, Tonya, I'm going to ask you to do a few little Cypriot twists for this. What have you got for me there?
Well, I bought you some luganiga.
OK.
Which are the Cypriot chorizo, really.
Yeah,
but it's got coriander and red wine, and they're just delicious.
OK, I'm happy. If you can chop them up and add them to the sausage meat and onion.
OK.
Also, oh, coriander, yes, please, to some of that. And coriander seed.
Yeah.
A little bit of that ground down and in there as well. If you can then throw all that together, that could be the filling for the pie. Now, this is a hot watercrust pastry. In here, I've got my flour, to which you're going to add some salt and some butter. Now, the butter needs to go in, and I'm going to crumb this down, break it into the flour now. And while I'm breaking this in, over in this pan at the moment, I've got some water and I've got a good lump of lard. Now, I've heated that water up. All the lard's melted and it's already in there, ready to go in. That's really, really hot.
The melted lard will soak right into the flour and make this a good, strong pastry that will hold a heavy filling without collapsing.
So I've just crumbed this down. I'm going to drop an egg in there as well, straight in, and we're ready for my water and melted lard here, which I'm going to add straight into the flour, and then begin mixing this, because it can be quite hot. Mix all this in together with the flour. This will bind quite quickly with the egg.
Shall I get on with the mixing with this?
Yeah, please. You've got the onions, you've got the sausage meat, you're going to have your sausage.
My sausage.
You've got the ground...
coriander seeds.
Coriander seed and the fresh coriander as well. Now, what I've got here, I've got the pastry here, and it's still quite warm to touch. Now, I've got asbestos hands, but even that Feels quite... now it's beginning to cool off a bit. Yeah, I feel this, Tonya. It's lovely.
That's hot. That's hot.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely.
See? And Tonya thinks it's hot. So what you do is you work the pastry a little bit more, and it just brings it all together. Now, you can see straight away, it doesn't take much work. It's come together already. It's really, really warm. Now, the pastry is about right. Now, I'm going to cut a little bit off for the lid. That will probably be enough. And then begin to manipulate this dough with a little bit of flour. I've got my rolling pin here. And you begin to roll it out to line that tin. How are you getting on, Tonya?
I'm done. Already, it's got its...
Quickest I've seen you work.
Oh, it's got this lovely Cypriot mix to it, so it's going to be even more flavoursome than your plain old English stuff.
There's nothing wrong with plain old English stuff.
No, this is true. My favourite foods are English too. That's very true.
I've seen you at the fish and chip shop.
Yeah.
OK. Pop your tin on there. What you need to do is be careful, lift up the pastry, and just dollop it in. Now, try and build it all up. It's quite tricky to work this dough sometimes because it is so hot, it's going to break. It's a fresh, warm pastry. So drop all the pastry in there, get it right down into the corners. Push it up against the sides. Likewise, this side. It's a lovely dough to work with. I love working with hot wash crust pastry. That is nicely lined at the moment, but what I'm going to do is just take a knife and trim just a little bit of excess around the outside. That is now ready. If I can take your... Oh, beautiful.
There you go.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to start by layering the bottom with this beautiful, heady mix of sausage meat right the way down, pack it right into the corners. Perfect. Now I'm going to make a little ridge down the middle, and I'll show you why. This makes it a very traditional sort of gala pie-like. Make a little ridge, and then you get your eggs.
So that must look amazing when you cut through it.
Let's hope so. Let's not build it up, shall we?
Now, how do I get that magic egg that runs right through the middle of the pie on every slice? It's easy, really. Top and tail some hard-boiled eggs and line them down the middle.
Then you get the rest of the meat, and then you pack it around the eggs that you put in there. So again, this seals the whole thing in and stops the egg from moving around. There's a little bit left in there. This is where you get your hands dirty. Don't be scared. Just pat it all down, spread it all over the top. This is going to taste great, you know.
You can smell it. It's the Cypriot spices that I can smell over this side.
Actually, I'm smelling the British pork. And I think it's going to be good, though. We've got our pastry up there. We've got everything's neatly lined. Now we're just going to pop the lid on. Now, we've left a little piece of dough. You've got a little bit of excess there as well. Again, flatten it down, a little bit of flour. Roll it out to the size of the tin itself. That then goes over the top, like so. It grips the underneath, which is just hanging over the lip. Again, another knife trim round. One more, that'll do. Get it down out of the way. And then just crimp it and seal it and push it down at the same time. This will allow it to come out as well. So again, crimp all the way around the outside. 2 fingers and a forefinger. Lovely.
And if you do make a mistake and you do make a hole, I know you don't, but I sometimes do, can you just patch it over with some of the dough?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can with this stuff. It is very forgiving. It's like rubber, this stuff. It's great. OK, got a little piece of dough left over, a little bit of flour on it. Again, this is just a little bit of decoration on the top. Knock out a little piece of dough, roll it out nice and thin. You don't have to do this, but if you want to show off.
And you always do, though, don't you, Paul?
What, showing off?
A little bit.
Me? Me? Never. Now, I've got a cutter in here. Cut little circles out first. 3, 4 will do. And then all you do, halfway down with your cutter, is just cut them like that. So what you're essentially doing is making little leaves. So you've got 4. Push one end, like so. And just draw your knife down. Don't cut it all the way down. And then cut the leaves, just a little couple of veins each side. And once you've done that, I've got some egg wash here, which is basically just a beaten egg. Brush it all over the top. Get your leaves and just pop them on wherever you want, really. Just makes it a little very decorative on the top. Again, brush that, a little bit of egg wash. And that's it. It's as simple as that. That is a pork and egg pie. Now, to bake this, I'm going to pop it into the oven at 200 degrees for 30 minutes, quite high. Begins to cook the inside, sting the outside. And then drop it down to 180 and leave it in there for 1 hour. Gorgeous. Beautiful. And when it has baked, I've got one here that has been nice and cool.
I'm going to hold that.
Try. There you go. Look how solid this is. This is the beauty of hot watercress pastry. And there you have it. Now, what I want to do is show you what it's like inside. So I'll grab a knife and we'll just cut down, be quite forceful. This is hot watercress pastry. I'm hoping they get an egg somewhere down the middle of it. And there you have it. There is your gorgeous raised pork and egg pie. Tonya, thank you for the addition of the Cypriot ingredients, but we'll have to wait a little bit longer before we can try it.
This could be a picnic pie or a hearty winter treat as well. Today, I've had some fun welcoming both new and old friends to create some wonderful pies and puds. There's Whitehaven's Cumberland rum Nicky, made with help from Phil. My spinach and feta parcels with Judy's Greek-style but very Yorkshire cheese. And, of course, that pork and egg pie with a Cypriot twist from Tonya.
And I think now it's time to tuck in, so please help yourself.
And first, the Flaouna's that Cypriot Easter treat.
That's delicious.
Thank you.
It's really, really good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tonya, taking me back to Cyprus.
And from the Mediterranean to Yorkshire.
The pine nuts come through really well, and yeah, the cheese almost binds it all together, doesn't it? It adds a little bit of creaminess to it. These are delicious, Paul.
And dough's like not normal dough because it's soft, you know?
And from the parcels to the pie.
It's delicious, isn't it?
It's lovely.
It's the watercress pastry that seems to hold it all together. If you'd done any other pastry, it just would have crumbled.
And listen up, people of Whitehaven, this is your Cumberland rum Nicky.
Absolutely amazing.
Oh, I could have that with a pint of cream.
That's a serious filling.
That's a proper pie, that, isn't it?
It's really seasonal as well, isn't it? I can just imagine having this at Christmas.
Yeah.
That is absolutely delicious. And the pastry's not bad either.
Yes, very nice.
I've had a great time today, and there's no better way to end than sharing good food in good company. I think I better raise the glass, actually. I think to Whitehaven, I think a nod to Whitehaven, but also a big yamas to Cyprus.
Yamas.
Thanks,
Yamas.